The lecture for Roderick Chisholm's Human Freedom and the Self. So first topic, agent causation and event causation. So in the article, he introduces this distinction on page 613. He says, I shall borrow a pair of medieval terms, using them perhaps in a way that is slightly different from that for which they were originally intended. I shall say that when one event or state of affairs, or set of events or states of affairs, causes some other event or state of affairs, then we have an instance of transient causation. And I shall say when an agent, as distinguished from an event, causes an event or state of affairs, then we have an instance of imminent causation. So as he says, he's borrowing some medieval terms. These are Latin. And I just bring this up because eventually when we read Ekstrom, she's talking about agent causation and event causation. And notice he's using transient causation to talk about like events causing other events. And he's using imminent causation to talk about agents causing events. And people got sort of fed up with these Latin terms, and they just said, let's just call it event causation and agent causation. And so this is just to like update you a bit on terms. When Chisholm talks about transient causation, eventually when we read Ekstrom, she'll be referring to this as event causation. And where he talks about imminent causation, eventually I think we'll see this referred to as agent causation. That's enough. Second, I don't know if I should even be mentioning this in the lecture. It might just come up in discussion, but I don't know. Maybe like to preempt some worries that you might have when you're reading this piece. So I don't know. It's always like hard for me to predict how people are going to react to things. Sometimes I think, oh, all the students are going to think this is wrong, and then everybody says, oh, that's convincing. Or I think all the students are going to think this is correct, and then people are like, no, I think the philosopher is wrong. So I don't know. This is just a guess, and I might be completely wrong. But like, if you find yourself reading this article and you're disagreeing with him, you're like, no, I don't think this makes sense. I don't uh, what he's trying to show in this article is that basically humans or agents like people, us, we can cause things, we can make things happen. And this is a special kind of causation, which is different from sort of other causation that we see in the natural world. So different from, a rock falling or something. We can be sort of the originators of chains of events in ways that are different from the rest of the natural world. And I don't know if that sounds perfectly natural to you or if it sounds like that's completely ridiculous and unscientific to you or something. But like, if you're in the second category and you read this article and you're like, what is this guy talking about? It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, pay close attention to section 12, where he's sort of explaining his view and arguing for his view, and he calls it a Kantian approach rather than a Hobbist approach. The Hobbist approach is one that a lot of people accept. And the idea is if we know of some man what his beliefs and desires happen to be and how strong they are, if we know what he feels certain of, what he desires more than anything else, and if we know the state of his body and what stimuli he is being subjected to, then we may deduce logically just what it is that he will do, or more accurately, just what it is he will try, set out, or undertake to do. So that's the Hobbist approach, and he says, no, that's false. According to the Kantian approach to a problem, and this is the one that I would take, there is no logical connection between wanting and doing, nor need there even be a causal connection. No set of statements about a man's desires, beliefs, and stimulus situation at any time implies any statement telling us what the man will try, set out, or undertake to do at the time. As Reid puts it, though we may reason from men's motives to their actions, and in many cases with great probability, we never do so with absolute certainty. And that means, in one very strict sense of the term, there can be no science of man. If we think of science as a matter of finding what laws happen to hold, and if the statement of a law tells us what kind of events are caused by what other kind of events, then there will be human actions which we cannot explain by subsuming them under any laws. We cannot say it is causally necessary that given such and such desires and beliefs, and being subject to such and such stimuli, the agent will do so and so. For at times, if he chooses, he may rise above his desires and do something else instead. And so, again, I don't know if that sounds ridiculous to you or not, but like, if it sounds ridiculous, if you're inclined to say, no, I agree with the Hobbist approach, just tell me everything about somebody's desires and then I can calculate, I can deduce exactly what they're going to do. Like, think about what you're saying. Like, think about how science works. Think about whether we actually have evidence for this Hobbist approach that you're defending. Because according to the Hobbist approach, you can figure out for certain the way that you can deduce for certain what's going to happen to a particle if you look at sort of the different causes affecting it, right? Like, there's no uncertainty when we're trying to figure out what's going to happen to a rock or something. We can sort of, write out the Newtonian physics, or if we want to get really complicated, we can write out the quantum physics for what's going to happen with certain sorts of things. But can we do this with humans? I mean, of course, right now, no. Like, clearly, nobody's claiming that the science is so advanced that you can predict with 100% certainty what a human's going to do. We're nowhere near that yet. Like, psychology can't I can't just like give you all the data about a human and then predict entirely what they're going to do. Of course, we can't do that yet. The Hobbist approach is basically saying like, but in principle you could. Like, in principle, if you knew everything, you would be able to do that. And then the Kantian approach is saying, no, I mean, you can mostly predict what someone's going to do, but sometimes they'll just change their mind and do something else, and that won't be predictable. And so, like, if you want to make your decisions on the basis of the scientific evidence that we have right now, I would suggest that it's sort of undecided. Like, are the Hobbists right? Are the Kantians right? We don't have enough evidence one way or the other. If you're sort of trying to apportion your beliefs to the evidence, if you're trying to sort of be a good scientist and make up your mind like that. Now, you don't have to be a scientist. You could be whatever you want. You can make your decision on other bases too. And like, again, I may be out on a limb here trying to like imagine what's going on in people's heads when it's not going on in your heads. But like, if you think, oh, it's very simple, we'll just eventually be able to calculate exactly what a human will do. Notice, like, we're not there yet. You're writing a check for science to cash in the future. And so you can't just say like, oh, this is the scientific approach or something, because science can't do this yet. Maybe someday this will be the scientific approach, but like right now, I don't think science is sort of clearly against what Chisholm is saying. And even if scientists sort of say, eventually we'll be able to fully predict what humans do, they certainly can't do it right now. And so you're sort of, if you say they'll be able to do it, you're sort of going beyond the evidence. Is it wrong to go beyond the evidence? No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, don't be too quick to jump to conclusions on the basis of thinking that, like, oh, I'm a scientific person and I think science will solve this for us. Because, like, whether or not it will, it hasn't yet. And so if you are making up your mind right now in 2021 about what to think, you can't sort of just fall back on science and say, oh, science tells me to be a Hobbist, because science has yet to establish this. Maybe someday, but not yet. So yeah, I don't know, that may have just been a waste of time or something, but maybe it was helpful. The last thing to mention, this may have come up in a lecture earlier, I can't remember. We're just going to go over validity and soundness. Some people start introduction to philosophy classes with this. They'll spend like a week or two teaching you about this and some other distinctions. I don't really care, but it is nice to know, and it comes up in this article. Like I said, it may have come up earlier in a lecture, but we're going to do it more this time. It comes up here on page 612. He just says, is this argument sound? And then he just talks about it. And what does he mean by that? So when philosophers talk about an argument being sound or an argument being valid, here's what they have in mind. So first, like I just said, we're talking about arguments. And what is an argument? Well, we've been through this before. It's sort of a series of premises leading up to one or more conclusions, or it's like reasons supporting one or more conclusions. So in philosophy, an argument is like the reasons that support some sort of claim. So that's what an argument is. And we can ask two things. Well, we can ask lots of things, but we can ask at least two things about an argument. We can ask, is it valid, and is it sound? So what does it mean when we ask, is an argument valid? Well, like it says up in the outline, an argument is valid if we're asking, can the conclusion be false while the premises are true? And if the answer is yes, then the argument is not valid. If the answer is no, then the argument is valid. Maybe I should have done that backwards. But like what you're looking for is the conclusion false? Or could you make the conclusion false but still make all the premises true? And if you can, it's not a valid argument. And so let's get some examples. An example. Here we have an argument. I like cats is premise number 1. I like dogs is premise number 2. And then conclusion. Oops. Conclusion, I like all animals. So we ask, is this argument valid? And so how do we figure this out? We ask, can the conclusion be false while all the premises are true? So first, let's imagine all the premises are true. So premise number 1, I like cats. Let's imagine I like cats. Number 2, I like dogs. Let's imagine I like dogs. So these two are true. And now we ask, can this be false? Can it be possible that I don't like all animals? Maybe there's some animals I don't like. So ideally, pause the video for as long as it takes you to figure this out, and then, write your answer somewhere. And hopefully the answer is no, the argument is not valid. Why? Because this could be false. How could this be false? Well, maybe I don't like snakes, or maybe I don't like parrots, or maybe I don't like peacocks, or there could be all sorts of animals I like. In fact, maybe I hate basically every animal except for cats or dogs. So this can be false, even though these are true. So the argument is not valid. We're going to do this for 2 more arguments, but before we get on to validity, we're going to do soundness. Now, how do you test for soundness? Well, first you ask, is the argument valid? And then you ask, are the premises true? And if the answer to that is, to both of those is yes, then the argument is sound. So if you have a valid argument with true premises, then the argument is sound. Otherwise, it's not sound. So you need a valid argument with true premises to be a sound argument. And so just bringing us back to Chisholm, when he says, is the argument sound? Notice that also implies, is the argument valid? Because it has to be valid to be sound. So he's asking, is the argument valid? And also, are the premises true? And notice that's exactly what he begins to talk about. He says, is the argument valid? Well, the conclusion follows from the premises. So that tells us, yeah, it is valid. So now let's check the premises. Are the premises true? But he says, but the catch, I think, lies in the first premise. And he says that actually the first premise is not true. So it is valid, but it's not sound because the premises aren't true. So let's bring us back to our argument. I like cats, I like dogs, I like all animals. Is it sound? So take a moment to pause and come up with your answer. Welcome back. Again, the answer should be no. Why? Well, to have a sound argument, you need to have a valid argument, and we already realized this argument is not valid, so it can't be sound. The premises could be true. I mean, in fact, they are true. So I do like cats and I do like dogs, but that's no help because true premises with a invalid argument doesn't get you a sound argument. It's got to be a valid argument. So let's do this here. Premise number 1, I like cats. Premise number 2, if I like cats, then I can fly. Premise number 3, or sorry, not premise number 3, conclusion. Conclusion, I can fly. So take a moment on your own to figure out, is this valid? And is this sound? And then, I don't know, pause the video while you do it and welcome back. So for valid, we have yes. And for sound, we have no. So first, why is this valid? Well, to find out if it's valid, can the conclusion be false even though the premises are true? So we imagine the premises are true. So premise number 1, I like cats. Premise number 2, if I like cats, then I can fly. So let's say both of these are true. In that case, is it true that I can fly? The answer is yeah, because up here we know I like cats. Up here we know if I like cats, then I can fly. And so you put those together and it means I can fly. So yeah, this is a valid argument. So is it a sound argument? Well, it is valid. But are the premises true? The first premise, is this one true? Yeah, that's true. The second premise, is this true? No, that's false. Clearly. So not a sound argument. One more time. Once again, evaluate for validity and soundness, pause the video, and then come back when you have your answers. Welcome back. Valid, yes, and sound, yes. Why? Well, first we check validity. Can we make this false? And can we make these true? Well, let's say I'm a professor at Ashoka, and let's say I'm a professor at Ashoka. If I'm a professor at Ashoka, I'm an employee of Ashoka. Then can this be false? And the answer is no, it just follows from these two. And so if these two are true, then this is true. So it's valid. And is it sound? Yeah, so I am a professor at Ashoka. And also, if you're a professor at Ashoka, you're an employee of Ashoka. So then it's sound. So the end, now you know this, and congratulations.